serious.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon also for people in Gaza. Um, I'm really happy to have this discussion with some of the best humanitarians I got to know. We have with us from Gaza three doctors who joined the MedGlobal Medical Mission, which is the fifth medical mission that we have in Gaza in the last few years. We have Dr. Hisham Al-Shair, who is originally from Gaza, from the city of Rafah, and he's a Canadian Palestinian, and his specialty is wound care and internal medicine. And we have with us Dr. Greg Shea, well-known humanitarian pediatrician from California, who's been in many parts of the world with MedGlobal and other organizations, disaster regions, and this is his first medical mission in Gaza. And also, of course, we have with us Dr. Rochelle Suez. She's a neurocritical care specialist from Chicago. She's been also with MedGlobal in many other medical missions, and now this is her first medical missions to Gaza. So I'm really privileged to have all of you. My name is Zahir Sahlul. I'm a critical care specialist from Chicago and the president of MedGlobal. So let's get going and start to introduce yourself and tell us about yourself and why are you joining MedGlobal Medical Mission in Gaza. We'll start with Rochelle, then Greg, then Hisham.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Sahlul. Hi, everyone, all the way from Gaza. My name is Rochelle. I'm a neurointensivist in the Chicagoland area. I've been in practice for almost 7 years. I started volunteering with MedGlobal in 2019. This is my third mission with MedGlobal. I was very eager to join the mission trip to Gaza. And a little nervous, to be quite honest. You know, it's still a very unstable area in the Middle East. And the Middle East has always been very close to my heart because my parents are both from Jordan. I was really excited to come to Gaza. I wasn't sure what to expect. And it's been very different from any other mission I've been on because it was more of a needs-based assessment type of trip, which I've really enjoyed. Do you want me to explain some of the things I've done right now, Dr. Sahlul?
No, but I mean, can you tell us why did you want to join MedGlobal Medical Mission to Gaza, in spite of the logistical, of course, and the security challenges that may happen? You know, a couple of days ago there was some exchange of fire. There were some bombing and shelling to Gaza. So why do you risk your life potentially to help the Palestinian people in Gaza, coming from Chicago, which is very comfortable and safe, and work in a tertiary center that's one of the largest in Chicago area?
It's very important for me. I don't know why I have this drive in me. I think it's found in all of us on this call to travel to these unstable areas, these war zones, to try to provide care to underserved areas. You know, being a war zone, I knew coming here that I'd be faced with a lot of neurotrauma, which is a huge passion for me. And that's exactly what I found around here. There's a significant amount of neurocritical care pathology. But more so than the pathology, I knew the Palestinian people in Gaza was a sect of Palestinians that was most in need and was very much lacking in resources, not just medical, but across the board in terms of food and water. So it was just very important for me to try to target a patient population that was in a significant amount of need. And even despite the instability of the area, I felt that it was worth it to come here and try to be of service.
So thank you, Rochelle. Now, Greg, we've met together in Lebanon, and I think in Jordan and Greece, if my memory is still there. You've been in many areas in the world. This is your first visit to Gaza. I know that you wanted to go badly for a few years, and this is now the opportunity. Tell us about yourself. Why did you choose to join this mission, and some of your observations?
Yes, this is my fifth MedGlobal mission, and I've been waiting to come to Palestine for several years because I have many Palestinian friends, and I know of the disparity in healthcare that exists in this area of the world, and even within this country. And so, because of that, we risk our lives and go to wherever we need to in the world to provide healthcare for the people who don't have what everyone else does in other parts of the world. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist, and sometimes on these trips, I act as a pediatrician. Sometimes I act as a family practitioner or an internist, and rarely do I get to act as a pediatric pulmonologist, which I did for 30 years at Oakland Kaiser. And so I was very happy to be able to come here. I was asked to work with the local doctors in Gaza and help them develop their skills working in the pediatric hospital and the adult hospital with patients with cystic fibrosis. Now, cystic fibrosis has always been a pediatric disease. Over the last 8 or 9 years, there are now more adults in the world with cystic fibrosis than there are children. And because of that, we've had to train our adult pulmonologists how to take care of these children. And this is made much more difficult because we don't have any of the modern medicines that we have in the United States and in Europe. And so we will all go wherever it's needed to provide the care that we need to. And MedGlobal gives us the opportunity to go to these dangerous areas and not so dangerous areas to provide the healthcare that needs to be given to these people.
Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you for your humanitarianism always, and long career in the service of the people of California and throughout the world. Dr. Hisham, we got to know each other's through another crisis in the region, right? Which is the Syrian crisis. And I know that you dedicated some of your life to help the Syrian victims of war. While you were in Turkey, you took actually a leave from your work and life in Canada to help the Syrian people. This is something that we hold dear to our hearts. Thank you very much for helping your brothers and sisters in the Syrian community, the injured, the refugees, and the victims of war. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your within your family now in Rafah. And this is your second medical mission with MedGlobal in Gaza. So tell us more about that and why did you choose to come with us this time also?
Thank you, Dr. Zahir, for the introduction. And before I introduce myself, I would like to say, the volunteer work that we do, I think it's more of a duty on us, duty on people who are blessed and have the luxury of living in safety and convenience. So my name is Hisham Al-Shair. I am originally from Palestine, and so I'm a Canadian Palestinian. I'm a medical doctor, and after medicine, I pursued a career in science and scientific research and developing innovation in medicine. The innovation that I have been working on and trying to push as much as I can in conflict zones, starting from Syria and now to Palestine, is wound vac using manual devices. Now, open wounds is a very big problem in conflict zones, whether they are from war trauma, like from shrapnels and actual injuries, or chronic wounds resulting from diabetic foot and pressure ulcers. In these localities, wound care is a very heavy task because these patients require a dressing change every single day. So imagine what the patient and the caregiver has to go through. The patient has to be hospitalized, or they have to make a visit every day to the hospital, or you need someone to go to their home. But with the wound vac, all these hurdles are removed. The dressing can only be changed once every 3 days or 4 days, and you only need 3 dressings to close the wound and get to the granulation tissue needed to close the wound. When I started at the beginning in Syria, yes, I was taking some work leaves every now and then, and volunteer my time to develop this modality. And thankfully, hundreds of patients were treated during the Syrian war. But then in the last 2 years, I dedicated that time to come with a full innovation, a full medical product, which we were successful in. We thankfully published a randomized clinical trial in the World Journal of Surgery recently, which shows the validation of the innovation. In Gaza, open wounds is a huge, huge problem. And it's not only because of the direct war activities, but it's because of the chronic wounds that people have, especially from diabetes. Huge number of diabetic patients who have chronic wounds. And because I have family here, I see these things in my own family. For example, the first day I was here in the European General Hospital, I invited my own cousin, my direct cousin, to the hospital to present his own wound. It was a wound in the plantar surface, widely open, and the guy cannot step on it. He's diabetic. He has other comorbidities, which makes it difficult. But with manual vac, as we've seen in Syria, these wounds can be closed very quickly with less infection and less risk of amputation. So it would be of a great service to the community in Gaza, not only to heal wounds faster, but also to free hospital beds, because patients can pursue the treatment in their own home with their own apparatus and without occupying a hospital bed, which is something very valuable in conflict zones.
Thank you, Dr. Hisham. And the same thing, by the way, we're seeing it in Ukraine. We just had completed our 7th medical mission in Ukraine. And this issue of wounds related to the war itself, of course, and related to chronic diseases is something that many countries suffer from. And there's not much advanced ways to treat the wound, or even basic ways, the same way that we do it in Canada and the United States, where we have these specialized teams from nurses, social workers, and physicians who specialize in wound care. You don't see that in many other countries, including Gaza and Syria and Yemen, Sudan and Bangladesh and Ukraine. So let's talk about some of your observations and what are you doing to improve the health of the Palestinian people in Gaza. As we know, there's a large number of Palestinians, about 1.2 million, who are in very small area, maybe 2 million. I forgot the number.
Close to 2 million, I think.
2 million. And one of the most crowded areas in the world. They're under siege. They have limited resources, and their healthcare benchmark, in spite of the challenges, is amazing because of the hard work of the Palestinian doctors and the nurses and the Ministry of Health. I was actually very impressed by the level of dedication that I've seen in the hospitals in Gaza City, Al-Shifa Hospital, in Nasser Hospital, the Rantisi Hospital, Turkish Hospital, and many other hospitals, and the hard work. But what are you doing? There's still huge gaps, of course. So tell us, Rochelle, you're a neurocritical care specialist. This is very niche medical specialty. Even in the United States, it's kind of relatively new. When I did my fellowship training long time ago, 30 years ago, at the University of Illinois at Chicago, we did not have neurocritical care specialty. But you're one of the few ones who have this specialty in the United States, maybe not more than few now. So what are you doing to introduce this field of medicine in Gaza? There is no neurocritical care specialist as far as I know.
Correct. So neurocritical care is still a very young field, even in the United States. I was really pleasantly surprised with the amount of neurocritical care pathology I discovered in the ICU and on the floors here, mostly at Shifa Hospital is where I've been volunteering my time for the past week. We covered a few different areas within the large sect of neurocritical care. I was able to make rounds with an intensivist in the medical ICU which surprisingly is mixed adult and children, medical cases, surgical cases, and obstetric. He is a very talented physician. I've been very impressed with the quality of knowledge amongst the intensivists, the internal medicine physicians, the neurologists, and the internal medicine residents. Very, very impressed. It's really not a lack of knowledge that they have, it's a lack of resources. So in the medical, or in this mixed medical ICU, there were several patients, including children, with traumatic brain injury due to what they call RTA, road traffic accident. There are even post-op neurosurgical cases for brain tumor resection. At Shifa Hospital, they don't have the fancy external ventricular drain kits we have. So they showed me the surgeon actually used the cannula of a peripheral IV and attached a Foley to the EVD in order to collect CSF in someone with obstructive hydrocephalus. And one of the biggest needs I discovered was that there's multiple patients with seizures and status epilepticus from either postoperative, elective neurosurgical cases, or due to traumatic brain injury. And there's no EEG capability whatsoever here in Gaza. One of the things we did was to initiate an education program of how to read an EEG, just the basics of how to read it. And the plan is to continue to build on that EEG education. And when I come back for the next trip, hopefully I'll be able to come back with an EEG cap. We use this at Christ Hospital in after hours when there's no EEG tech available. You snap in these gel electrodes and just attach the cap tightly to the patient's head and then strap it in. And then it's wirelessly connected to a laptop, and you can pull up an 8 electrode EEG, which is really good quality. And I think a tool like this would be life-saving for a lot of patients in Gaza, especially with the amount of traumatic brain injury they see in children and adults. Right now, what they do is they just empirically treat with phenytoin. That's the only IV anti-epileptic they have. And if they're intubated, they just put them on propofol and then try to wean off when the phenytoin they think reaches therapeutic levels. They can't even check levels of phenytoin. I think something like this is going to change care drastically in Gaza. Additionally, aside from, go ahead.
No, what I'm saying, that simple things that we can do can make the life much easier on many patients and doctors and nurses. And I like your emphasis on introducing not only certain technology that are relatively cheap and adaptable, so that way you can build resilience within the population. And Dr. Hisham Shair also will mention the technology that he created for wound care, but also on emphasis on training, because the idea of this is to build resilience within the local communities through training, through education, through introduction of technology, and sometimes donations of medical supplies. That way, the community itself is stronger to weather the storm, whether it's a war or chronic diseases or outbreak. So by emphasizing on training of healthcare providers, then you are actually building this resilience within the Palestinian community in Gaza and other places. Sorry for interruption, but keep going.
Thank you. Yes, that's really the goal of this trip, which has been exciting for me, because most of my other trips I'm seeing patients in clinic and you're really just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and then once you leave, the problem sometimes occurs. But the point of this trip is to establish a long-term intervention. The other thing I worked on this past week is we did a lot of education on updates for the management of ischemic stroke, endovascular therapy, and hemorrhagic stroke. I met with the chair of internal medicine, in which neurology falls under that department, as well as the neurologist here. There's only 4 board certified neurologists in all of Gaza. And so I reviewed their ischemic stroke protocol, and we spent several hours actually revising their ischemic stroke and endovascular protocol, since they're excluding a lot of patients from endovascular therapy. Unfortunately, they've only just recently started using thrombolytics just 11 months ago. 11 or 30 vials were donated from the West Bank, and they're running out. So we just transitioned to tenecteplase from Alteplase in the United States, and I'm hoping, to try to figure out a way to get tenecteplase donated to the hospital here. I did meet an interventional cardiologist who's very, very talented, and he is the one who does the thrombectomies, even as a cardiologist. He uses an aspiration device rather than the expensive stent retriever devices we use. And so they've been excluding patients with an NIH less than 6, and if they present greater than 6 hours. And we've updated our guidelines and extend that window up to 24 hours. And so I've been happy to see that they were open to revising their stroke protocol. And that's something we're hoping to continue to build on in the near future.
Thank you, Rochelle. Greg, you mentioned cystic fibrosis. And, for people who are not in the medical field, they probably don't know this condition unless they have a relative or a child who has cystic fibrosis. Can you describe to us a little bit more about this disease, this condition, and what are the current resources that are available for the children who have cystic fibrosis in Gaza, and comparing them to what we have in the United States? I think everyone now understands that there's healthcare inequities or inequalities. In the United States itself, we see it in cities like LA and San Francisco and Chicago and other cities, where we have neighborhood who have access to the best healthcare, a neighborhood that does not have access to good healthcare. But in Gaza, comparing it to the United States, you have huge inequities in healthcare. Tell us about cystic fibrosis and comparing what we have in Gaza and what we have in the US.
Yes, our challenge has been twofold with teaching and furthering the care for patients with cystic fibrosis in Gaza. Now, 40 years ago, when I graduated from medical school, patients in the United States died of cystic fibrosis when they were less than 10 years of age. Now in the United States, because of extensive research, the median age of survival is into the 40s. This genetic disease primarily is in Caucasians. 1 out of every 20 Caucasians in the United States is a carrier for cystic fibrosis gene. If 2 people get together who carry the gene, who don't have CF, they run a chance of having a child with cystic fibrosis. Since the gene for cystic fibrosis was found and the diagnosis has begun, that there are over 2,000 different genetic variations which can cause the cystic fibrosis gene to malfunction. So in the past, it was felt that cystic fibrosis only affected whites, primarily Northern Europeans. However, now we know that we have Blacks with cystic fibrosis, Asians with cystic fibrosis, and Arabs with CF. And it's pervasive around the entire world. People around the world have been dying in childhood of this mysterious disease causing recurrent pneumonia, where you drown on your mucus until you die. And the children have very severe malnutrition from not being able to digest their food properly. In the US, we have expensive drugs which will help these patients so that they live longer, but none of those drugs are available here in the Middle East, and especially not in Palestine. So some of the simple drugs that we've used to, for instance, just do breathing treatments, we've had in the United States for 15 or 20 years. They're not available here because they're too expensive. So when I came to Gaza, I saw patients that were as sick as the patients I saw when I was in medical school, and patients here die when they're less than 15 instead of living until they're 40 with cystic fibrosis. The doctors here don't know how to take care of CF because it's sort of a new phenomena to know what this disease is that has been prevalent here before. And so I've been working at various hospitals teaching the pediatricians and the internists about how to diagnose the disease and how to take care of it. Unfortunately, the drugs that we need, the laboratory tests that we need are not available in Gaza. And my plan when I come back from the trip is to work with different agencies to try to raise thousands and thousands of dollars to buy the equipment that we need for the patients with cystic fibrosis. And I'm hoping that the CF community around the world is going to step up and donate money and donate equipment and medications to help these patients live so that they don't die in their early teens, but live into adulthood just as they do in the United States and in Western Europe.
And I think there's a responsibility, ethical responsibility for pharmaceuticals and companies that care about patients with cystic fibrosis to take care of patients who have this condition, not only in the US, but also in other places in the world. And they make a lot of money, and maybe that could be part of their social responsibility is to help the patients in Palestine and Gaza for free, or for very discounted rate for their very expensive drugs.
This is true. And even within the country itself, the country of Israel, we have patients, cystic fibrosis is very common in Ashkenazi Jews. The patients with cystic fibrosis on the Israeli side of this country are receiving all the latest care and medications. And on the Palestinian side, all the medications are donated to the Ministry of Health. They're very expensive medications, and they don't make it down to the people. And so this is going to be a huge campaign to not only get everyone educated, but to get the proper therapy and to teach the people how to use it properly. What I've been doing is actually examining patients full of rooms of doctors, internists, pediatricians, physical therapists, nutritionists, geneticists, infectious disease specialists. There might be 20 or 30 people watching me do a history and physical on patient that they actually know from their experience, and to show them how we approach these patients and how we treat them as a multidisciplinary team, all working for the good of the patient and not just taking care of their lungs, for instance. It's a very labor-intensive way to treat patients, but it's the only way that these people are going to get better.
Dr. Shair, I mean, of course, you know Palestine probably more than any of us. This is your families and community. Your family live in Rafah. People, I think, in the United States will be amazed to see the resilience and the determination to live in spite of the challenges among the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank. And when I tell them about my observation in Al-Shifa Hospital and Nasser Hospital, which are, you know, quite impressive medical centers in spite of the challenges, some people don't believe that. So what are some of the challenges that you have observed in Gaza in general to make healthcare, dignified healthcare available to the Palestinian people?
Yes, resilience is astonishing, as you said, Dr. Zahir. Indeed. The challenges, I would re-echo what my colleagues have mentioned. We have very knowledgeable doctors to start with. Doctors are very knowledgeable, not only doctors, but but a good amount of nurses. In my sessions were attended by both doctors and nurses, and you find them giving you tips and tricks and information about guidelines on treating diabetic foot and so forth and so on and so forth. That the challenge that I would add on, that maybe that hasn't been very well emphasized today is there need to be a process. We in the West and in the developed world, we are good in creating SOPs and processes and follow these processes. But this is something lacking in the Middle East in general, but most prominently in a place like Gaza. Yes, we have the knowledge, the doctors have the knowledge, but we need to put this whole knowledge into a process. For example, a process of referring the patient from the GP to the specialist. As you know, there is no referral system in Gaza. The patient can go directly to the specialist. So this is one point. A process of admitting patients into the ER, for example. A process of treating patients with open wounds, especially those that need multidisciplinary approach. Someone who needs to see a vascular surgeon, a plastic surgeon, an endocrinologist, and a podiatrist. What is the process? In the current situation, the patient has to navigate all this water by himself. But if there is a process that will make the life of the patient and the life of the doctors and the caregivers and the whole healthcare system much easier. And that comes to the point of knowledge transfer.
So just this process, for people who are not familiar with the medical field, when you talk about process, you mean you have to have a protocol that specify what do you have to do in detail. One, you do this. Second, you do this. Three,
yes.
You do this. So that's like you have a checklist. You have specific instructions to the nurse, to the doctor, to the administrator on what to do. And that will make the treatment standardized. That means a patient who comes to any hospital will get the same treatment by any doctor or by any nurse. So that way you can improve the outcome of patients. And all of these protocols are based on evidence. It's not based on the whims of the doctor or the nurse. It's not based on what I feel it's right for my patients. It's all based on evidence.
Precisely. Yes. That's true.
We're joined by Dr. Thaer Ahmad also, who is the head of the global health department within the emergency room at my hospital, Christ Advocate. Salam, Thaer.
Salam. How are you guys? Good to see everybody.
Good to see you. So tell us, Thaer, this is your second medical mission to Gaza. You're from the Palestinian American community in Chicago. And tell us about your feelings and your observations this time.
Well, yeah, I mean, we came in March with the short-term medical intervention then. We did some bedside ultrasound teaching, things that we thought would make a significant difference in a quick and efficient way in a low-resource setting. And so what I found then was that there was a ton of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm about it. When we came this time, we followed up with the same physicians that we trained, these emergency medicine physicians that were being trained on the what we call the point of care ultrasound, this kind of using these quick bedside butterfly ultrasound machines that can be carried around in your pocket and can be hooked up to your phone or to your tablet or iPad. And I found that these physicians who we in March spent a few weeks training and doing a crash course had been doing a lot of studying on their own and have been growing and developing their skills and have been using it in a very practical way in the emergency department every day. Me and Rochelle actually, we stopped by the Shifa Hospital, which is their main referral center. It's the trauma hospital here in Gaza. And we had seen just how, really it's extremely overcrowded. I mean, it was packed with people. They were all over the place. People were, coming in droves. And, just the idea of these doctors being able to utilize this, ultrasound machine to make really important decisions that can save lives and really help these patients was it's incredible. We spoke to one of the physicians, and he had mentioned to us about a case where there was an aortic rupture, an abdominal aortic rupture. And he mentioned the case to us because it had happened right after our first training. And we had just kind of followed up. How is that patient doing? Did they do great? Did they do okay? And the patient was doing well. It had been, a while. And it's just amazing to see them using these things and using them to help people in a real way, in a real important way too. So definitely, it's been awesome to see that. And they're still very enthusiastic, and they want to they want to learn as much as they can about this stuff.
That's amazing. So these devices are small probes that you can connect to your iPhone or to your iPad, and you can put, and then your iPhone or iPad will become actually an ultrasound screen. So you can put the probe on the patient's heart or chest or belly. You can see if there's any bleeding. You can see if there's any air around the lung. You can see if there's any fluid around your lung. You can look at the heart function, and that will help you making decisions that can be the difference between life and death for a patient that you will see on the bedside. You don't have to transport the patient to distant places. You don't have to get an expensive CT scan that may not be available or MRI. You just treat the patient at the bedside when you do this ultrasound. So we provide the training in MedGlobal. We provide the technology. We donate the technology. Each one of these machines is about $2,500 with the iPad. So people who want to help, and sometimes people think that they can help by giving money, which is important, and food, which is important. But you are actually, if you're donating money to purchase an ultrasound that can be treating a patient in Gaza, you're saving thousands of lives, because this doctor who is trained by MedGlobal Team or other organizations will be using this ultrasound to improve the outcome and save lives of thousands of patients in her or his life. So if
you want to just quickly run through it, it's amazing because these doctors are using it for these trauma cases that they see, for heart attacks, for pregnant patients. They're using any chance they can use this and utilize it. That's what they're using these things for.
So how can people help? People who are listening to this, who are familiar with the situation in Gaza, in Palestine, want to help. And I know that the community has been very generous. Diverse people donated a lot of money to MedGlobal and other organizations. By the way, this mission is done in partnership with Pious Project, which is a local Chicago organization that has been done a lot of good things, not only in Gaza and Palestine, but in other parts of the world. And their team is with us in Gaza, 4 members team or 5, I forgot. And they're doing also a lot of humanitarian work in terms of helping distributing food and digging wells for clean water and other humanitarian activity. So donation is one important thing. So what else can people can do to help the situation in Gaza?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways. I think one of the most important things that I've noticed is initially spreading awareness about what's going on. I think that you'd be surprised to find that there are a lot of people who don't even know where the Gaza Strip is. I mentioned it to one of my medical colleagues that I was going to the Gaza Strip, and he thought I was going on vacation, as asking me if the beaches were nice. So the beaches are nice in the Gaza Strip, but this is definitely not, a common vacation spot. And it'd be really nice if it became commonplace and we took it upon ourselves to at least spread awareness and say, hey, we work with this organization called MedGlobal, and they work in the Gaza Strip. They work in all these different regions, and this is what's going on in the Gaza Strip. This is why this organization needs to go there. I think that early step will really help generate some momentum, get people talking, of course, supporting the programs, and just making sure that we can, we can have a lasting impact and kind of hopefully come to a solution eventually.
That's really important. Greg, from your perspective, what can we do? What can people do to break this barrier of helplessness? Some people think about the situation in Gaza and the Middle East that it is hopeless, but actually it's not. When you go there, you see hope, you see happiness, you see culture, you see history, you see people who are laughing, who are having parties, who are excited about you as a guest, who will treat you and embrace you wherever you came from. I gained 5 pounds when I went to Gaza the first time because of the good food that I ate. My wife was with me and she had the best time. Maybe it's not a good or common vacation spot, but actually you'll have a lot of fun when you come to Gaza. So Greg, tell us about some of these observations. What can you do also in terms of advocacy to break these barriers of fear?
Yes, I think education is one of the most important things. It's one fact that we learned is that the doctors here are only receiving 60% of their salary, which is a low salary to begin with, but they're only receiving 60% of that. Yet these people persist. They persist in providing the care that needs to be done. They're so excited that we're here and that we're sharing our medical knowledge with them. They're surprised that we're volunteers and that we're not being paid to be here, and that we're bringing our skills to help their people. And when they find out that we're here to help their people, and when the patients themselves find out that we're here to help them, they're very encouraged. I think that if people in the United States and around the world knew what was happening in Gaza, knew what was happening in Palestine, and knew of the disparity of care, they would be more open about donating money to people that are different than they are to help these people live longer and enjoy life just as they do.
Hisham, this is your community, and what else we can do in terms of advocacy and donations and volunteerism?
Yes, advocacy, spreading the word, education, volunteerism, all these things are definitely needed. The siege is killing the people. The siege is killing the people, really. Going into in and out of Gaza, either in terms of humans and patients or in terms of equipment, has been very, very challenging and difficult over the past decade. This is, I would say, easing or ending the siege on Gaza would be the most tremendous help to the Gazan people. But definitely, this is, we have to be realistic and practical. This is not something that can happen over the next Wednesday, over the next 1 month or so. So that's why we need to start with awareness, raising bringing more volunteers to Gaza to see the real world and spreading the word. MedGlobal has been very instrumental in this for this cause, and I really, really admire that, as not as a doctor and a volunteer myself, but as someone who belongs to this community. It's the missions that I have contributed to with MedGlobal have been very uplifting to me personally. I would have never entered the medical healthcare system in Gaza, despite being from this community, as with this ease, without the help of MedGlobal and MedGlobal Team. So supporting these missions is also very important for breaking the siege. So we need to end the siege. We need to, that takes raising awareness, supporting these missions, and donating more to medical supplies and other causes in Gaza.
Rochelle, Greg, I think that we will have an annual conference, MedGlobal annual conference in Chicago. We would love to have Dr. Hisham Shah with us, but he will be still in Gaza, continuing his humanitarian duties. But he will be with us virtually. Are you planning to attend the conference so people can talk to you and we can address some of these issues that you witnessed of the first hand, and also educate the people about your observation in other places?
Yes, I'll definitely be there November 18, 19 to talk to anyone about my experience there. I've been trying to use social media as a means as well while I've been here, just to educate people about what's going on in Gaza, what the healthcare needs are, what the community is like, how kind and thoughtful they've been to us. But I think the conference is going to be a great avenue to promote that education and hopefully promote more donations to MedGlobal, so we can continue these missions and try to eliminate all the disparities in Gaza.
And people can register actually online. I mentioned the website. It's November 18th and 19th in Marriott, downtown Chicago. We will have many panels about the impact of wars and conflicts on health, the impact of COVID-19 also on health, and many other interesting issues that people in the medical field and outside of the medical field will find very engaging and interesting. Can we end with maybe a story of hope? Any of you can tell us something that you've witnessed and made you feel hopeful of the future?
Sure, I have a story. So my first day visiting the medical ICU at Shifa Hospital, I saw an 8-year-old girl who had a traumatic subdural hematoma that eventually developed into a subdural empyema. It was evacuated nicely by the neurosurgeon, and then it was, what I saw her out of the corner of my eye, and her leg and arm were tremoring under the sheets, and sure enough, she was seizing. She was treated with midazolam and phenytoin. It looked quite terrible. And then several days thereafter, I went back to the ICU to see what happened to her. And she had actually been sent to the floor. So we went to the floor to see her. And it was really nice to see her bounce back, as a lot of children do. She was awake, alert, had very mild left hemiparesis, but was talking and eating. And so, it was, despite the lack of resources here, the doctors are very hardworking. They come into the hospital every single day. They don't take a day off. They're very innovative. They're very devoted to their patients. And that's why I feel strongly that if we continue to provide them with the resources they need, it's only going to continue to improve the care. The Palestinian people are a very resilient group of people, and continuing to support them will only improve their care and their quality of life here.
And let's not forget that we have a team in Gaza all the time. So we have these training medical missions that happens every few months, but we have a team that continues to provide services to the patients in Gaza throughout the year, led by Raja, who is a nurse from Palestine, from Gaza, from the local community, who works day and night to help the people in Gaza. Dr. Greg Shea, you've met our friend Dr. Nasser, Dr. Saber in Nasser Hospital, who's one of the few pulmonologists in Gaza. Can you tell me some of your observations about him? This is an amazing person who's board certified in the United States, came back to his community in Gaza, continued to serve them in spite of the challenges. And, people like this need to be supported with teams like this who provide training with resources and prayer. So tell us about Dr. Saber.
Yes, it's exciting because he knows what needs to be done, because he's worked in Saudi Arabia and he went to medical school in Yemen. He's been in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, and he knows what needs to be done or should be done. He knows what state-of-the-art care is, but he's frustrated because he has to start at the same level that everybody is here and work his way up. When he first came to Gaza, adults were having bronchoscopy with no sedation. They were just held down and they did bronchoscopy. And he's had to be the person coming in and talking to people who've been doing certain procedures, certain ways for years and years and years, and be the new voice of what should be done. And thankfully, they've been welcoming to having the new information available to them, that what makes it better for the patients in general. One thing I've really noticed that people have mentioned to me several times, of all the doctors here from MedGlobal, is that we approach our patients differently than the doctors here do. We are generally concerned about every single patient no matter what social class they come from, no matter what's going on in the family, no matter how they got the injury. And they're amazed at the amount of caring we give in our evaluation and treatment of the patients. It's not we said you need to do this and you go ahead and do it. It's cooperating with the patients. And so we're also teaching them the art of medicine. And it's very nice to hear that they come up and say to us that you really approach the patients differently. And we can see that that definitely makes a difference in how the patient's going to accept what is going on.
Dr. Thayer, and maybe we can end with Dr. Thayer and then Dr. Hisham with a story of hope. I believe, frankly, that I learn more than what I give in these medical missions. I learn from the determination and the professionalism, the knowledge of our Palestinian colleagues and colleagues in Yemen and other places, Syrian colleagues, more than what I teach or give. And that helps me to be a better physician in Chicago. I've noticed that during the COVID pandemic, that the principles of being a little bit more creative or resilient, especially in terms of the impact of crisis on my mental health, helped me dealing with my patients with COVID, especially at the peak of the pandemic in Chicago in the United States. Have you seen that, Dr. Thayer, in your from your observation?
Absolutely. I think you just reminded me because, you know, the hot topic in the United States is about burnout and wellness and resilience and how you can build the character and kind of have create longevity for your career. I think the physicians here have figured that out, especially given the circumstances. I mean, we're talking about physicians that have to operate under very limited resources, under the threat of violence, under really tough circumstances and really sad scenarios here. And I think what they figured out is, you know, for them, the purpose of the work that they do, they cherish it and they don't take it for granted. The opportunity that they have to serve their community in an extremely meaningful way, it's something that they absolutely feel like it's the honor of their lifetime. Like it's something that they feel that it's an incredible calling for them. And so it makes you, and you see it manifest in them wanting to be better at what they do, to develop themselves professionally, to learn how to interact with difficult patients. And so that's contagious. You know, I come back, I want to be the best possible doctor that I can be after meeting them. And I realize that, you know, whatever energy I have, they've not only matched it, they've got double the energy. And so it's incredibly contagious. It's super inspiring. And then, you know, you get to appreciate exactly kind of what you have, but at the same time, you realize if things aren't going well, when things in Gaza, oftentimes you can have electricity issues, resource issues, running out of supplies. Exactly what you mentioned is how can we deal with this? How can I navigate in this really tough environment in a way that is helpful for my patients, is good for my wellness, and my staff is also feels supported despite having all of the obstacles in place. So yeah, that's definitely, I mean, it's rejuvenating. That's, you know, on these trips, it's very rejuvenating.
Right. We do have disasters in the United States right now. We are hit, our hospitals and many hospitals, by 3 viral infections, RSV, influenza, and COVID-19. We have limited resources in the United States. That may come as a surprise to our Palestinian colleagues in Gaza, but we do have limited resources. And we have to learn from them the principles of dealing with these limited resources, whether it's ethical principles or being creative, how to prepare, how to plan, how to replace, how to reallocate, how to adapt. All of these are principles will help us being better doctors and nurses and administrators in the United States. Hisham will end with the story of hope from you, and hopefully we can see you all in Chicago in the conference. Hisham?
So one of the observations that I noticed in Gaza is how flexible the physicians are and how receptive they are. Typically in the arena of medicine, and I've worked in many places. I worked in Canada, I worked in Turkey, introducing new innovation to doctors. Generally, the medical community, generally speaking, they are resistant to change. And if they are implementing a certain modality, they would like to continue using it. Innovation is something difficult to introduce to the medical community. But in Gaza, it's totally the opposite. You speak with the most senior or the most junior physicians, all of them, when they see new innovation, and I mean innovation in medicine, they jump on it, and they see the value. They immediately tell you, this is going to save us beds, this is going to save us electricity, this is going to treat more patients. That makes my life much more easier, and the life of all the medical missions. But speaking of hope, I would like to change gears and mention a small story that all of us have seen outside the hospitals, outside the white coat. Yesterday, and when we were in the opening ceremony of one of the projects, a whole bunch of kids gathered around us. Those kids living in these dire conditions, one would think that they will be depressed, they will be sad, but they were very cheerful. They were cracking jokes of all types, until they actually dragged us to play soccer with them. So I can't see more hope in Gaza than I see in those kids. Everybody went back with an internal strong sense of hope and optimism.
So we have to end with this. Thank you very much, everyone, of you.
So that will end my contribution here.
And I would love to see you all in Chicago in the conference.
Thank you for hosting us, Dr. Zahir.
Inshallah, and we'll see you next time in the next mission. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe trip back home, and salam.
Thank you.
Assalamu.
Shukran.